How's it going, K-Man?
Pretty good, Ev. Pretty good.
Nice, that's the way.
We're actually recording, twice within a week here?
I know. Look at that.
I know. We're going to have to go into therapy and get our procrastination back. So,
Yeah, that's it.
I guess we can kind of jump right in since it's been such a short time since our last podcast. But you said there was some stuff you wanted to get to, so let's get to it,
Yeah, I'd say before we get to that, I'd just want to, send our love out to, those in Lebanon who are affected by the explosion the other day.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really bad situation. And, my wife's family are Lebanese, and so they're struggling a bit with what's happening, considering that the country already is in turmoil before this event. So,
Yep.
Just sending love out to everyone in Lebanon.
Yeah. Once I saw that, I actually thought of your wife, who's a friend of mine. So I don't think of her as your wife type thing. And I thought about that and thought about reaching out, but I thought I would have seen something posted or something like that if it was a huge struggle. But I guess from what you're telling me now, they're dealing with it in a different way. So
Yeah.
love goes out to them and all the people dealing with loss during this time. People are, on as far as recorded in the media goes, people are dying in record numbers from all kinds of different reasons over the past 6 months. So, yeah.
Yeah, so today I had something that I wanted to talk about. It's a bit more on the personal level, but I think it'll be very beneficial for everyone who's listening.
Mm-hmm.
The other day I received a message from my sister-in-law, which is generally uncommon, but I know that when I do, it's something's happened at home. So I actually live in another country than my entire family, so my only contact with him is, usually by Messenger or Skype or something like that. But when I received the message, I was like, okay, well, something's happened, right? Which is never great when you're not at home and you can't really help.
Yes, yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I contacted my brother straight away, and he let me know that my twin brother attacked my dad, right? And it was quite bad, apparently. My dad's okay, but I think before I go into sort of what happened and why I'm bringing this up, I thought I'd go in a bit of backstory about my twin brother and why he may have reacted the way that he did. So my twin brother and I are fraternal twins, so we're quite different, despite growing up together, having the same friends, doing a lot of the same things. But we did seem to both follow a spiritual path in our own way. My brother's happened to be a bit more on the religious side, and mine was a bit more on the spiritual side. However, both of us, over many years, developed deep insights into the nature of reality, let's say. But with my brother, for many decades now, he's struggled with mental health issues. Now, originally, he began to struggle with anxiety, where he had trouble going to work. He had trouble being with anyone else other than a few select people that he felt comfortable with, because mostly he had this thought pattern that would tell him that unless he was around someone safe, that if he went into a panic attack, he might die, right? Or maybe he just didn't feel comfortable around other people, knowing that a panic attack was quite likely to happen, right? And he didn't want to be embarrassed by it because it happened quite frequently. So while he was anxious and had these bouts of anxiety, he didn't do much in terms of trying to get help. Now, he did try to take medication, but for some reason, medication just never mixed with him very well. And he would often take it and have adverse side effects like extreme heart palpitations, which of course would, for him, cause further anxiety. And so I feel that he quickly gave up on sort of the mental health system that he lives in and decided to sort of battle it out on his own, which he's quite a headstrong person, and he always does things the hard way generally, and that's how he learns. So he decided to sort of tough it out himself. But because of that, it kept persisting to the point where it was affecting his life and his marriage. And one year he called me, and I could tell he was suffering greatly. And I asked him if he needed me to come home and help him, right? By this time, we're, well into our adult life. And, I had my own thing going on. However, it was obvious that he needed a lot of help. And so I decided to go back home and leave my life temporarily to help him through this process. So when I got back, it was obvious his marriage was falling apart. A few events happened, and him and his wife separated while I was there. And in that time, we decided that it would be best to help him work on his business and work on his anxiety. That was the biggest thing. And to sort of take him out of this sort of situation that he'd been in for so long that was causing this anxiety, right? To try and just give him a different set of, different environment. So we did that. And during that time, it was about a 6 months time, he made amazing progress by basically disidentifying with the thought patterns around his anxiety. And at that time, I was on this big kick that, you can progress through positivity, right? So as long as you sort of removing the negative thoughts with positive thoughts, that you can accomplish more in your life. And so we started exercising, which I thought was key, to show him that although he may have this mental barrier that, his heart's going to fail or there's something physically wrong with him, like his thyroid or whatever, right? That's not true. He's actually gone to the doctor plenty of times. They're like, no, it's not it. You just have anxiety. So we focused on exercise, which helped immensely. And basically anyone out there who has any mental issues, I highly recommend exercise. It's probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself. And so we would focus on running. So we would go running for a short amount of time at first and then slowly increase that duration. And he would have anxiety of running by other people. All right. So even just running and someone else is out in the field, he would try to avoid the situation and get very angry if we tried to go close. So I had him sort of recontextualize his interactions with people. So instead of sort of fearing what might happen around other people, I gave the suggestion, well, why don't you just make it your mission to say hello, to give them something positive, right? So instead of just fearing running by them, give them a, a good friendly wave when you go by. And he started doing it. It worked, right? And so slowly, he started getting better and started sort of going out on his own, which was a big deal. And as he started doing that, he kept seeing it improve to the point where the anxiety was manageable and he could go out on his own. So it was looking very positive at that point. So I decided that it was time for me to head back to my life. And he seemed quite confident that he could do it on his own. I was like, great. And so I left back. And after a couple months, I started hearing sort of from him and these very strange messages and emails he would send me. And I started getting concerned about his mental health. And at one point, he sent me a message that was just incoherent, right? And I was very concerned. And then I get one of those messages from my sister-in-law, call home. I was like, all right, shit, here we go, right? And so it turned out that he had been sleeping in a car. He was researching Freemasonry. So he had sort of bitten into conspiracy theories and ley lines and things like this. And while he was researching them, he was in another town, he was sleeping in his car and was woken up by the police. And he was scared, didn't know what to do, and he drove away really quickly, right, and evaded the police. And so there was a warrant out for his arrest. So my parents told him it's best to, turn yourself in and clear it up and whatever. So he did so. But the whole time he was, they're after me, people are after me. He's having this psychotic episode. But he turned himself in and they put him into a day holding cell where he proceeded to have an anxiety attack. So they decided to take him to the hospital, and he was under police guard at the time. And what happened was that during that time, the psychotic episode continued to play out. And he visualized a bloated woman on a stretcher while he was there was his dead girlfriend. And he freaked out. And he tried to get up, and the police tried to restrain him. And my brother is, in fact, a very strong and aggressive man. Very strong. And he fought 2 police officers. He knocked one out. He was pepper sprayed and then subsequently charged with assault on 2 police officers. And so for the next year or so, he was in and out of jail and mental health facilities where he was trying to fight this charge, right? So eventually the verdict came down and he was found not criminally responsible for the action and was sent to a mental health facility for him to get the help that he needed, right? So he was sent to a number of different places and they put him on different medications, and it certainly helped out with the psychosis. So he wasn't having as many psychotic thoughts, but it did have adverse effects like motivation and depression and different things like that. So he was at the point where, he was really just a shell of his former self and not doing the things that he loved in life, like creating music or creating art, because he's a hyper creative. He's a genius, in fact, of creativity. So at that point, I actually decided to move back home with my family. And we saw the state that he was in after a couple of years, and we decided, okay, well, let's try and get him out of the facility and we'll see how it goes. And of course, it had a very positive effect on his well-being. He improved dramatically. He got to go out, get a job, see people. Of course, the review board assessed his risk to the community and found that he was of low risk. And so after a while, he seemed to be making great progress while he was on his medications. But of course, the medication affected him. And once he was off the medication, he slowly descended again back into the sort of religious mania that he tends to hold on to, let's say. So it came to a point where he was again getting very aggressive and threatening. And we had to call the mental health facility and say, okay, you have to please come back because we're afraid he may do something to someone. Because he's a very threatening person when he gets like that. And so they came and got him, and he spent another year in the facility. And then again was released as a low-risk patient. And he's been out since then for about 2 years. And in that time, he again stopped taking his medication. He was living with my parents at this time because he was getting a stipend from the government to live, but was not motivated enough to work. So he's living with my parents, and they found a garbage bag full of his medication that he looks like he hadn't been taking for about the past 6 months. And of course, his psychosis increased significantly in that time to the point where he was getting very threatening to my parents and it sort of not being very nice to them. And so what I come to is this point where I get this call the other day about him attacking my dad. And I talk to my brother. He tells me the story. And my brother had, knows the situation and knows my brother. And after they called the police at what had happened, my older brother made sure to let them know that this is the situation he's in. Be mindful that when you do arrest him, that he may fight back, right? Which was very good because the police dealt with it in a very good way and apprehended him, and he fought back a bit, but they managed to settle the situation without much conflict. So that's where we are in terms of where he's at. Now, what I was most concerned about was how my dad was doing. So my dad was in hospital when I first initially called. And they told me the situation. I told them, my interactions with my twin brother, what had been happening, that may have sparked this attack on my dad.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my biggest concern was my dad. And when he came back from the hospital, I gave him a call. And this is what I wanted to get to. And basically sort of the power of stillness and the power of the awakened mind, let's say. So I was talking to my dad, and my dad's a very stoic guy. He grew up in the West Indies. He had 11 other brothers and sisters. He was the oldest. He was very poor. And so he grew up in a time where, you never talked about your feelings and you just held that inside. So when I talked to him, he was just like, yeah, everything's okay. Don't worry. I've got a few bruises here and there. But I really, that's sort of the superficial level. Of course, it's going to, when you cop a beating like that, you're going to be feeling it for the next few days. But of course, that's not really where the pain resides.
Yes.
So I asked him, Dad, how are you feeling? Like, how are actually you feeling about, what happened? And he sort of paused a second, right? And he's like, well, it's my son. That's my son. And I heard my mom say, she's like, oh, you're going to cry, don't cry, right? I was like, Dad, it's okay. It's okay if you cry. And at this point, we're having a video chat, and I'm looking right at him, and I could see that he's starting to tear up. And this is where I was just in that space, right? Allowing my dad to experience what he really truly was internally experiencing. And I held that space, and it was mostly because Evan got out of the way. And he broke down, and he started crying and crying and crying. I've never seen my dad cry like this, ever. And it was heartbreaking. And my mom said, like, don't cry. And I was like, no, just let him cry. Let it out. And so as he's crying, there's an upwelling of emotion inside me, and, tears are streaming down my face. But I wasn't sad. I wasn't sad about the situation. It was just this pure expression of love that was coming out of everyone in the situation. It was amazing. I couldn't describe it. That all this pain that my dad was feeling, he could actually express. He felt safe to let go and express it. And it only lasted for about a minute. But that's an eternity, of course, for my dad, because he doesn't cry like that. And I remember my mom saying, I love my family so much. I love all you so much. And to me, it shows the power of stillness and the true expression of inner alchemy, where you can turn something so terrible as a family member violently attacking you into a place of pure love. And it was amazing. That's the power that we all have inside of us. It's not the power that you have over other people. That's ridiculous. That's force. It's the power of inner strength and inner change. that we all have by stepping out of the way and letting it pour out, or creating a space for those who need it. Yeah, so that's it.
So, yeah, how long ago was all this?
Oh, it's like last weekend.
So what's the status of your brother right now?
So he actually called my dad the following day and apologized profusely for it. He's like, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I can't believe I did that. I wish I hadn't. I don't know what came over me," type thing. And my dad's like, "It's okay, but, you've really messed me up. My leg's really sore. My back is really sore. Like, you really, really hurt me." And I asked my dad, and it's like, "Did you ask him why he did it?" And it's like, "No, I didn't think about that. But, next time I talk to him, maybe we can talk about why he's doing this."
Did it come out of nowhere, or was it like a...
So it was like a sort of a build-up. So what had happened was my brother was baking some bread, which he'd been doing for the past year or so. Mm-hmm. He's really good at it. But apparently he was baking a lot of bread, like way too much that you could ever eat, right? Mm-hmm. So my mom's like, maybe you shouldn't be making so much bread. There's tons of it. We're just going to waste it all. And he screamed at her. He's like, "You don't tell me what to do." And my dad's like, "Please don't speak to your mother like that." Right? And then he attacked my dad. So it's always been sort of, you can't tell me what to do with my brother. And so, my dad sort of had to defend himself. He didn't fight back because, of course, that would make it much worse. And my brother is much more powerful than my dad. And so he basically had to run outside. The neighbors got involved. And my brother basically packed up his things and ran to his girlfriend's house, or drove to his girlfriend's house. And that's where he was apprehended. And at this point, I haven't spoken to him, because right now he's in transition between different facilities, so I'm not too sure where he's at. But I'm not even sure if he'll actually speak to me, because despite the fact that, we're twin brothers and I've helped him through many difficult situations, he does have a very adversarial sort of relationship with me at the moment. And, that's not really him. That's just the mental health issues that he's going through. So, yeah.
Have you noticed any changes in your outward expression because of it?
Not particularly. So, years ago, I've always sort of felt responsible for my brother and how he's feeling and how he's doing. So there was always like a sense of guilt I had with my brother, but I in fact had another situation very similar to the one that I experienced with my dad while I was traveling in Argentina. My wife and I went to this sort of Hare Krishna yoga retreat. Mm-hmm. And there was a man there that I met. He was an American guy. This was 7 years ago. And I remember speaking to him, and there was a quality that this guy had that for some reason you could just tell him things, right? Very deep personal things that you wouldn't really tell many other people. So at the time, my brother was struggling, and I told him about my brother. Mm-hmm. And when he looked at you, he would like pierce your soul. That sort of gaze he had, right? It was very uncomfortable from the standpoint of the ego, right? Because he's looking right into you. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And so I told him about my situation with my brother. And I was concerned that my brother would commit suicide at some point. And he said, "You have to let your brother die. It's an insane thing to say, right? But I had this insane upwelling of like sadness, like he was dying, like he was dead. And I sort of smothered it. And he's like, no. He's like, let that go. And I did. And I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And he held the space. And my wife was there at the time and she tried to comfort me. He's like, no, let him cry. Right? It was the exact same situation. And the same thing happening with him. You know, he's crying these sort of tears of joy at this release. Yeah. And at that point, I released all the guilt and burden I had of taking responsibility for my brother and allowing him to lead the life that he wants to and love him anyway for it. Yeah. So despite the fact that he did a terrible thing to my dad, I understand, you know, he's suffering greatly. And my dad understands. So I gave up my guilt about these things long ago and just loved my brother. So I feel perfectly fine.
Yeah, there are systems of belief that believe that, you're reincarnated or incarnated with your family for a reason, right? So you're all trying to balance out your karmas by being born into the families you're born into, especially with the families you're born into, because that's who you're closest with and who, for most people, you'll have the most intimate interactions with. So a teacher of mine at one time had told me that, take care of your family karma first. Basically saying, take care of the situation you're born into first before you start going out into the world and, trying to help other people and do this and do that, clean up your own backyard, basically. So there's many of us that kind of jump out into the world and try to help others. But when it comes to us and our own families, we still have so many unresolved things that are unsaid, things that have been swept under the rug, things that we're avoiding, right? And I would say to anyone listening that if you're running out and trying to help other people when you have these type of things in your own backyard, take a good look at that and look at the element of yourself that's kind of running away, or let's say trying to project onto others things that you're kind of left unresolved within yourself. And you may find that in resolving the mundane thing of just being at peace, or from whatever perspective you find it karmically balanced with the members of your, family that you grew up with. If you did so, there's a lot there. There's a lot there for your own individual growth. And it's not easy. It's actually easier to deal with strangers, right? And people that don't know you that intimately, people that haven't known you since you've grown up, since you were a child, right? That know you like that. So, yeah, to find a certain peace and a way to kind of, have open love and let go of expectations and past impressions, just so you can be in a healthy as possible relationship as far as you are concerned. You can't force on another family member for them to be what you want them to be.
Yeah, that's it.
That wouldn't be letting them be a free expression of the only. But as far as you are concerned, get to a place within yourself where you're at peace with them, right? So that whatever it is they might be doing with their lives or their individual expression, you can find a way to remain in love and peace with it, and not let it let's say, be a negative detractor upon your life and not be a source of harm at the end of the day. Just that work alone, I think a lot of people, it would do them a great service just to do this and then see the effects it has now on your life as you go out into the wider world. Because these same systems of believe that you're incarnated into your family, and that's the best way for you to awaken, is to deal with what's put on your plate right from the start. And actually, a lot of people skip over this and wonder why they have problems with awakening or stabilizing any kind of level of deeper awareness. And it's because your family, if you skip over that, it ends up being your blind spot. And you'll find people in your life that will be able to trigger these things. There's even a term where I'm triggered, right? Where is this triggering? What's triggered and why is it triggered, right?
Yeah.
People are, pointing fingers at that triggers me, but why? Why does it trigger you and not another person? There's something there. And so to look at these things in ourselves, it usually comes from our early childhood and family. And to face these issues, not avoid them, to delve into them, and to kind of bring your psyche to some kind of level of completion or wholeness when it comes to these things, is not just from a spiritual standpoint, but from a physically health standpoint, a mental health standpoint, and ultimately spiritual standpoint, is not a waste of time by any means. And actually avoiding it will cost you more time in the long run. So, thank you for, being as honest and open as you are about your personal life here. And hopefully it can be of service to some people listening.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to sort of bring up was that my brother has had very deep insights into his spirituality and would often say things that were extremely profound. And it was evident that he, in some way, was touching the divine. But what happened was that he allowed the mind to grab onto that and say, that's me, I can do it, and I've become like the right hand of God. And there's a lot of people who go through this situation. And if you've encountered anyone who has extreme mental health issues, a lot of the time they will have this religious mania. And it's not hard to go down that path once you sort of get that glimpse of the divine. Yeah, so it's very, very important that you're vigilant with what comes up afterwards. That's really the work that you have to do afterwards. With that initial awakening and understanding your true nature. I actually came across this amazing quote yesterday from Joseph Campbell. If you're familiar with him, he wrote the book The Power of Myth, which is quite popular in spiritual circles. And he said, "The psychotic drowns in the same water in which the mystic swims with delight." And I thought this was amazing because it's extremely true. Both of them touch the nature of reality. Yes. But one tries to grab hold and saying, I know. And the other one lets go of knowing and becomes a mystery. So just be extremely vigilant with everything that comes up within the psyche.
Yeah, actually, I've heard that quote in another iteration of it, saying the mystic swims in the same waters in which the madman drowns. Carl Jung actually spoke to this as well. And basically he said, when one develops inwardly, there will come a point where they will get great revelation and great insight into themselves and other people. And they will then be faced with the fact that they understand more than those around them.
Mm.
And that will be empowering and also frustrating. And how we deal with the emotions that will arise when this happens is of the utmost importance. And he goes on to say that basically you will have to do your own battle with megalomania.
Mm.
Because relatively speaking, the fact of the matter will be that you will stand in understanding above those around you. And so what you do with that then is a matter of, relatively speaking, again, your character that you've developed up till that point.
Mm.
Because it doesn't matter whether it's power due to insight or power due to physical stature or power due to intelligence. Power has a corrupting nature. And so I'd spoken to you earlier about this, is that one must not forget the basics and the base upon which they stand. Because when you get to higher levels of understanding or ability in any facet of life, if you do not have the character and the wisdom to deal with that, it will end up being harmful.
Mm.
A great example of this is just the Star Wars story.
Mm.
Anakin Skywalker, the most powerful, whatever Jedi with all the potential. But there was something in his childhood he never got over. He never got over being a slave. He never got over being separated from his mother. And he never got over the anger he felt at the death of his mother. And those things, that lack of being able to control things, ended up expressing itself as he got older and got into a relationship. And the fear of losing the one he loved, the most important woman in his life, once again drove him over the edge.
Mm.
And his power ended up being harmful to himself and others. And so, as we develop and go through life, before you take up any spiritual endeavor, I would say to you, develop your basics. In a monastery, the first thing they'll do is give you a lot of menial tasks to do. They'll make you get up early. They'll make you go to bed early. They'll make you eat a very strict diet. And they'll give you labor to do. And they'll make you sit quietly and meditate for a while. And they'll make you sit and do mantras for a while. And see if you can deal with it. See if you can just deal with that, regulating yourself. Discipline. Discipline will save you later on.
Mm.
So a lot of people try to skip the disciplinary and the discipline aspects of the spiritual path. And that's why there's so much disservice being done to that in the form of lots of different gurus out there and things like that these days. Because they're saying, it's not about, sitting down and going to the monastery. It's just about understanding the truth and then, go and live your life free, right?
Mm.
And that is not untrue, but they're skipping over, right? And these are also people who have fallen to the megalomania, right? Because if that's what they're teaching, that's also probably what they're practicing, right? So it's important to deal with the basics. Like you were saying, exercise is great.
Mm.
Regular exercise is a great way to keep yourself disciplined. Regular habits, just the basics, right? If you're not paying attention to these things, it means you're overlooking something. So there's a way in which your ego will be able to trip you up. If it's tripping you up where, let's say some basics here. Cleanliness in your house and in yourself. If you're overlooking that, that's something that you're not overlooking. There is no real excuse not to do that, right? It's a way of whether it's a lack of care, a lack of laziness, lethargicness, apathy. That will only be amplified later on if you gain understanding. If you're lazy, not exercising, indolent, right? Not diligent. That will only be amplified later on when you gain deeper understanding or any kind of power. If you're self-indulgent, right? Overeating, indulging in too much television or leisure, that will only be amplified later on, right? When you gain any kind of wisdom, insight, power, or understanding. So anything emotionally that you're avoiding in your childhood life, your family life, right? Those things will also only be amplified. So I would say deal with these things. It's not saying like, okay, well, I can't do anything then until I deal with this. No. What I'm saying is make sure you address these things and find a way to deal with them on a very practical level, a very balanced level, a very normal life level, so that they're not being overlooked or swept under the rug. Find a way to practically deal with them in your daily life so that there's a discipline to it, a routine to it. That's progressively trying to bring all of them into balance that's healthy. And then when you have that base, it allows you the space to now go even deeper within without having to worry that you're going to trip yourself up later on. And it takes humility so that you'll be able to pull yourself back from the temptations that insight brings with it, which is the temptation to, hold that power over others, to use it upon others, to stand above others. So megalomania, right, in all of its expressions. So, yeah, I would suggest to anyone listening, and having gone through it, myself, is to find a way to deal with the practical aspects of your life and find balance there, where you can find a rhythm. Don't overlook those things as you move through your spiritual life.
Yeah, that's good. Like, for me, I took a sort of a page out of Eckhart Tolle's book when he says, start with like chores that you hate, right? So, I hated washing the dishes. So I would wash the dishes with the intense mindfulness that's necessary not to hate it. Right? Or it could be vacuuming or dusting, something like chores. It's a really good way to start that sort of level of introspection that's necessary to you when you start dealing with things that are much more emotionally triggering. So for me as well, bedtime is a really annoying time for me when trying to put two kids to bed. So instead of being annoyed by the situation, or even if I am, being mindful of my annoyance and realizing that what I want, really, the forces at play, let's say, is I want to just sit down and relax. And I'm sick of this, right? So it's really that desire for me to want to sit down, right? Which makes the situation much more frustrating. But remember, you're dealing with children. They're going to do their own thing. So you have to have that level of patience and openness to navigate those situations without getting angry and lashing out. Yeah. So that's a good one for me.
As you're saying that too, realize that these things like that annoy you, or you're overlooking, or you're saying, it's okay, whatever like that. On a very practical level of life, a lot of people use spirituality as an escape, saying, okay, I'm beyond these things now, so I don't need to worry about that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
One, you're deluding yourself, because that's true, but that's not true in the way that you're thinking about that, right?
Mm.
A teacher of mine said, all those things may be true, but what is your actual visceral experience? Are you experiencing freedom from a body? If that's the case, then do that.
Mm.
But if that's not what it is, if life is put in front of you a very normal, mundane, practical things to do, then go about doing those things and learn to be detached from it, right?
Mm.
To be able to just, because it shouldn't make a difference then, right? If life has a lot of people, and because of the examples of spiritual teachers we've been given, right? And it's basically the rock stars of spirituality, right? Like Buddha, runs away from home and, ends up sitting under a tree one day and gains enlightenment and has all these followers. It's a rock star story, right? Yeah. He was born a prince, first of all, right? Then you have like Jesus, right? Like, freaking, an angel comes down, and tells his mom, the chosen one is coming. And, he's born on the run from a king. And, 3 wise men come out of the east to like bow down and give him gifts and stuff when he's born. And you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And then he does a sermon on the mount, right? And then he gets crucified, then comes back 3 days later and rises from the dead. This is some rock star spirituality stuff, right? Right? Remember, they have their purpose, but there's also the guy that was like, I was a fisherman, and I was a fisherman for my whole life. And by looking out at the ocean and contemplating the waves, I came to an understanding of life. Mm. I had 2 kids, and then died in my fishing hut one day.
Yeah. That's
right.
Mm.
There's that guy too, right? Mm. And actually, there is no story that can't be the story of a spiritual master.
That's exactly it.
And that's life. Whatever life you're in right now, right? Think of this as, let's say, the autobiography of a yogi. Think of it, what chapter you're in, but understand that that's where your story is going to end. And if you can think of life in those terms, then don't look for the rock star status. You're already the rock star, right? So when it comes to these things, understand too that the things that annoy you, that you're overlooking, that you're leaving to the side, you're being lazy about, these coincidentally will also be the things that pull you out of your meditation, that don't let you deepen within your meditation practice, the things that will distract your mind during your meditation practice. That's where they'll arise again. So they just won't let you deepen your meditation, right? Naturally speaking. And this is where a lot of people go into using, say, drugs and chemicals as enhancers to deeper levels of meditation. But speaking from a completely sober standpoint, right? The things that you're given in your life, relatively speaking, are there for a reason for you to deal with. And having dealt with them, they won't bother you because you would have resolved them. So if they do come up in meditation, you'd be able to say, I see that issue. I have worked on it and resolved it, and I've made this conclusion, and now I'll move on. I can be at stillness again. And it won't disturb you. You'll be able to go that much deeper into yourself because these surface things won't be able to stop you from going. But until you have kind of made a reckoning with these things, you shall not pass.
I'm loving the references today.
You like that? Right?
I love it.
So don't overlook them and work them out. And this is kind of like I was saying before, the definition of karma yoga. Perhaps you're given your experience in a body to work these things out, right? So that you can go inwards and not have them bother you anymore. It's like a merciful act, actually, right? So if you can't do it in there, then do it out here. So there's no part of your life that's not, let's say, a part of your meditation, right? So that there will be no difference between when you're sitting down in meditation and when you're walking around everyday life. Don't see them as separate, see them as one. See your life as meditation when you're up from it. And anything that's disturbing you when you get up from meditation will be what disturbs you and stops you from being at peace in meditation. So keep the meditation going and then deal with things as they arise. Stay on the level of awareness of the forces at play. And then your sitting, walking around life is no different than your meditation life. I also had a lot of stuff that I wanted to say in today's podcast, but I think we can leave it for another time.
Yeah, sounds good.
Because I think your story has given a lot to think about, right? Because it's a very practical, and as we go through life, I think a lot of people aren't unscathed by family members having mental illness. I think it's quite common, more common than we like to talk about. And so, make some space there.
That's it.
Make some space there.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Oneness Radio with Cayman and Ev. Hope you enjoyed it and you got a lot from it. And we'll see you next time.
Peace out.
Peace out.